Planning Commission, Monday, June 26, 6 p.m.
We're getting feedback. Nancy's mic is echoing and coming back from all the speakers. So that's good.
Okay.
No? Still echoing.
All of us are echoing.
Coming from just there? Coming from the projector?
Testing.
No, still echoing. Coming out of the projector. Right here. Test 1, 2, 3.
How about now?
Test 1, 2, 3.
Seems to be good.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that did the trick.
Just one more detail. Cool.
Thank you very much. So with that, I'll ask for the roll.
Chair Moore,
Here.
Alder DePula,
Here.
Mr. Homburg,
Here.
Ms. Fallett,
Here.
Ms. Fox,
Here.
Mr. Stein, Mr. Conrad, and Mr. Grice are excused.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the minutes from June 12, 2023?
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a second. Any changes, corrections, additions to June 12th? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
The minutes are approved. Item number 4 is order of business. I'd like to suggest that we move new business number A and B, public hearing on the request by McConnell Agency, up to the front of the agenda, since that looks to be a much smaller item, and they're here already this evening.
I would make a motion to take that out of order.
Second.
Right? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Do we have any appearances this evening?
Nothing that came in. I see a few people here, but I think if we could just get confirmation that that is to do with an item on the agenda rather than anything else. Yes.
Okay. Is there anyone online that is online to make an appearance this evening?
We've got all associated with the project.
Okay, great. Then we will close the appearance section and go to what is now 6A. Under new business, a public hearing on the request by McConnell Agency LLC, DBA American Family Insurance, for approval of a new awning sign at 320 West Broadway, Suite B, case number S-013-2023. Welcome. Please identify yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Scott McConnell. I'm the new American Family Insurance agent in Winona.
Okay.
I took over for Matt Young. Matt Young retired on June 1st, and I took over his book of business on 6/1 and moved my location from just behind the Battery Store by Valley Flowers over to the Hard Terrace.
Okay.
The Hard Terrace building. So,
Terrific.
when I worked for, I live in Cottage Grove. My son's going to go to school here in Winona next year. But when I took over the American Family Insurance Agency in Winona, I was gifted a kind of a keepsake from the original Dream Bank downtown that was just off the square, and that would be the red awning that's in question right now. When Dream Bank was originally opened downtown, they kind of had that awning. It was kind of a keepsake, so to speak, for myself and for American Family. My wife's family has been a part of American Family for probably almost 40 years. Her dad was an agent for 40 years. Her brother was an agent, and so I guess I didn't really have a choice to become an agent, but that's what I'm doing now. So, but the sign itself is about it's about 3 feet. It's about 36 inches high, 66 inches wide, and 32 inches deep. I do have the ownership's approval to both relocate the suite lettering if I need to relocate it, as well as to put up the actual awning itself. I tried to do a rendering, but due to my lack of height, it's not quite as high as it should be, but it would be about it'd be about 1.5 foot higher than that. So basically what it is with that sign, with the area that I'm at, I have a lot of clients who go to Waypoint. I also have a lot of customers who don't know exactly where Waypoint is, and the directional signage and the ease of seeing the awning, the ease of seeing the American Family Insurance piece, the ease of seeing kind of where we're at would really help. It would help myself, obviously, but it would really help our customers more. So they kind of knew where I was, and because right now I think the only signs that I have currently are a lot of stuff that's on the window, and based on the sun, obviously it's tough to see some of that white lettering. So my request is just to have a little piece of history for my own office, so to speak.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else here to speak during this public hearing section for this particular request? Okay, then we'll close the public hearing and move to item B, which is consideration of action on the request by McConnell Agency LLC, DBA American Family Insurance for approval of a new awning sign at 320 West Broadway, Suite B, case number S-013-2023. Doug?
Thank you. So the request here is for a new awning sign at 320 West Broadway, Suite B. The sign is an original awning from the American Family Insurance Dream Bank location and is approximately 16.5 square feet facing northwest. The property, the Yahara Terrace property, is zoned Community Design District, and additionally a comprehensive sign plan, CSP, for that building was approved by the Planning Commission in March of 2015. The applicant does have approval from management of the Yahara Terrace building to be able to exceed and deviate from the CSP, and so they're therefore this evening requesting an exception to do so. The city standards, signage standards for awning signs do allow for one on-building sign per business, and this would be the applicant's only on-building sign. There may be some window signage and such, but this would be the only exterior. It does face the pedestrian walkway rather than a dedicated street, but that would be the same condition for all of the units and all of the commercial spaces along here. So awning signs in the CDD are allowed 1 square foot of sign area for every foot of building's facade length, up to a maximum of 75. The applicant space is 26 square feet of frontage. The letters, it's allowed a maximum of 12 inches of height for sign copy and not to exceed 50% of the area. The sign as proposed has 5-inch letters and appears to comply with those standards. Awning signs must be at least 8 feet above the sidewalk. As shown, this would be 7 feet, 7.5 inches above the sidewalk. There is some limitation there with the balcony above, which you can see in some of the materials that were submitted. The approved CSP does not allow for awning signs. It only allows for a projecting wall sign or blade sign. And the reasons mentioned are why the applicant is looking for that exception was sort of the historical significance of this sign itself. Just of note, a zoning permit was not needed for this, for the occupancy of this space, as the tenant space was vacant for less than 6 months and previous use aligned closely enough with the proposed use. If the Planning Commission chooses to approve this, the recommended conditions of approval and findings of fact are included in the staff report. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, I'll open up to commission members. Chris, do you want to start?
Sure. I think the sign looks good. It adds a little interest to that facade. No problems at all with it. I would probably modify condition 2 to say if the sign requires extensive structural support system should be designed by a licensed engineer. We put that in there when we redid our sign code because some of these signs are really extensive. This thing is pretty light. 2 old guys are holding it up with one hand. Sorry, I had to just throw something in there.
I didn't walk for 3 months after that, so. No.
But it doesn't need extensive
Yeah.
structural support. If it did, and I know that's a little bit subjective, but I don't suspect this sign does. It's probably going to be bolted into the existing facade, and that's about it.
Right.
So I don't see why he needs it's our code, but I don't think for a sign of this size, because some of our awning sizes get real big, which is why we put it in there. And then the height exception, I think, is minor. I'd even mention that it's minor. We put that in again because we didn't want signs, especially the blade signs hanging out where somebody doesn't see them and rams their head into it. So other than that, I think it looks fine.
Okay, great. Come on.
I love it. I think it looks great, and I think it. I mean, we've talked before about the challenge with the businesses that are there, and a lot of them have the sandwich board, but that's not great in the winter, and I like this.
Thank you.
Agree, really nothing to add. I think it looks great, and I like the idea that it's a historic sign and you're able to reuse it.
Thank you.
So, and I do think it looks good. I
I wasn't sure until, because it looks really big in my garage, but when I put it
Probably,
there,
yeah.
it didn't
yeah.
look very big.
Yeah. Oh, it looks good.
I think it looks great. Love that it came from Dream Bank, and it looks great. No problems.
Great. Yeah, I would agree with Corey. I know that we all have felt for the businesses there before, just because of the angle that the businesses are in relation to the road and the parking lot. It definitely, I think, makes it more challenging for the businesses there. So hopefully, as you said, the awning will help. So with that, I'll be happy to entertain a motion.
Move approval, finding of fact 1 is written by staff, finding of fact 2 just after off, say minor, so it would read a minor height exception is warranted given the limitations. And then conditions of approval 1, condition of approval 2, insert after requires extensive, so it'll read if the sign requires extensive structural support, it'll need to be designed by a licensed PE with final approval. And then 3 and 4 is written by staff.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
With that, we will go back to item number 6A, public hearing on Compass Properties on the request of determination of conformance with the approved general development plan for the site located at approximately 4601 to 4711 Monona Drive between Springhaven and Dean Avenue for mixed-use development. Case number 2-016-2021. Welcome. This is Compass. This is your opportunity to present whatever you came to present this evening regarding this.
Apologize for the baseball hat. I had a flight and canceled, so I ended up going through 2 other cities to get here in time. So I couldn't go home and change.
Hello, everyone. My name's Matthew Murtos, here with Compass Properties to present revisions to the previously approved GDP for the project known as the Bloom on the 4600 block of Monona Drive. The project initially began as a joint venture development between Compass Properties and the Neutral Project, but as things progressed due to some differences in our underwriting methods and overall design objectives for the project, it was ultimately determined that it'd be better for just one of us to proceed as the sole developer for the project, and we ended up acquiring Neutral Project's 50% ownership stake in the development entity. After that, we went back into the model, made the changes that we thought were more realistic and appropriate for this market. And unfortunately, we're left with a project that was no longer financially feasible, given the previous design. So over the course of several weeks, we got together with Aaron from McGann Construction, the general contractor, and Matt Frydock from TKWA, the new lead architect, and came up with a design that worked and eliminated some of the construction and cost inefficiencies that we were dealing with in the previous design. The three main changes that we made were eliminating the townhomes, combining the two buildings along Monona Drive, and then an overall review of materials being used in the facade and throughout the project. We believe that this new design complies with the previously approved GDP in that the ingress and egress to the site is generally maintained, overall massing, height, and setbacks, unit count all generally maintained, and we still have all the same tenant amenities, the fitness center, bike room, club room, community garden, dog wash, dog run, and BMO Harris still anchoring the south retail portion of the site, and a co-working cafe retail use on the north end of the site. And we're also including all of the initial sustainability initiatives, solar, Zipcar, and EV charging. We hope that you all find that you're in support of these revisions as well. And I'm going to pass it over to Matt Frydock on the Zoom from TKWA to go into a little more detail on some of the design changes and overall project design.
Great, thank you. Matt?
Good evening, everybody. I'm assuming that I'll be able to share my screen. Yep, looks like I can.
Yes.
You guys see the floor plan up?
Yes.
Great. So I'll just kind of walk through the plans, and then we have some model views here. Just give you a little explanation of what we've done here with this revised plan. We're rotated here. North is facing to the left. Monona Drive is on the top of the page here. Dean is on the right-hand side. The main tenant space remains down at the corner of Monona and Dean, with BMO space being anchored at the corner with their drive-through tucked behind. Stretching to the north then is a mix of resident amenities and residential units. The lobby, the main lobby for the building, the residential building, is up further towards Springhaven, and then anchoring the corner on Springhaven and Monona is the cafe co-working space with some generous outdoor patio space available for it. The back side of the site, or really the kind of the Gordon Avenue side of the site, we've shifted the drive lane a little bit and reconfigured some of the parking and the ramping, also with the effort of maintaining a generous buffer, across from the residents across Gordon Avenue. We see this more as a park-like setting where we want to program in various elements. We're starting to indicate things like seating areas. We want to include some berms, to screen headlights from, residences across the street. And then, leave enough space to get some, good sized vegetation and planting. Kind of tucked in the middle of the back of the space is some of the resident amenities with the garden and the dog run that was mentioned, as well as the Zipcar parking space. Just looking above at the upper level floors, it's a mix of similar size units and unit mix as the previous design. And it's, the same kind of 4 stories that we had before. We are terracing back on that 4th floor on the Gordon Avenue side of the property. Lower level, again, is all residential parking at this point, with the access off of the internal kind of drive lane. Looking at some of the model views here, conceptual model views. So this is looking from the southeast corner where you can see the BMO Harris space. basically what we're doing with the massing here, recognizing that this is a longer building now, being one larger building, is we're trying to break up the massing and the materiality to, get some both relief and break down the scale as much as we can. A big driver in this was we had to get this building to be combined to a single building for, picking up some of the efficiencies of construction and costs associated with breaking the building and having lower level, run between them. So this is a little bit more efficient to build and to program. So we've got masonry on the corner, kind of anchoring the corner. You see that on both of the main corners. Giving some relief with recessed balconies where we can. And then we're looking at the idea of opportunity for some public art elements to help further kind of brand the development and also bring a little bit of art to the site. Flipping around to the north side here, what you're seeing here would be that second kind of retail space with the cafe co-working. We're envisioning the parking along Springhaven would be, kind of focused on that retail parking, so it has easy access and visibility. And then we've got the patio space that can wrap around, again, using that masonry on the corner. And then as you look down Monona, you can see the relief, the bays, the projecting, the recessing to kind of, again, try to break down the massing of the building. A little bit closer view of the mid-block. So you've seen the apartment entry here, bringing that with a little bit larger scale entry element with 2-story entry piece and a projected, canopy that comes out. We're suggesting the idea of potentially some green roof elements on that canopy element. The units that come down to grade with the site sloping, we're planning to utilize that to our advantage of giving those units a little bit of separation from the street and the sidewalk and having terraces or kind of stoops that may be separated with either, garden fences or hedges. Basically with the setbacks, we've got a lot of room that we can do a good amount of landscaping. And the intent is to kind of create some of those layers of separation and buffer for those residents that are on that street level. Looking at the back side here, this is kind of the back entry for BMO. This is an important element for them and their use and functionality on the site. We've worked that through and coordinated with them as far as what they're looking for the most part, as far as signage, general intent, and as well as entry. You're seeing here a suggestion of some covered parking with an opportunity for solar on those. That's kind of internal to the site, and it's also visible for people to see that there's solar on the building. And that's also where the Zipcar would be located on the kind of north end of that. Zooming back out, you can see the overall massing, and again, the step back that we're doing on the 4th floor to create some terraces and a little bit of relief to the massing of the building as we move to the west. Also, you can start to see some of the landscape buffering on the west side here with, the berms at the corner, some seating areas, and, the amount of kind of vegetation we're hoping we can fit in that area. And then one more view from the west side, kind of more on the south side. Again, the bank drive-through area is down here. Again, you can see the seating area, some of the vegetation, and the massings of the building, the material changes to, again, try to break down that scale and bring a little bit of visual interest to it. Matt, anything else you want to add?
No, that's great. Thanks, Matt.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Anyone else have from your crew that wants to say anything else about it before we close the public hearing?
No problem.
I could probably say something. I'm Tyler Noel, president of Compass Properties, and this project, unfortunately had to change, and it was a combination of poor design, but it also is historic times for interest rates, construction costs, inflation. So when we started this process, basically it was unbuildable. We were not able to move forward without making some changes. I wish we started off this way, and I apologize that we didn't take over it's quickly enough on it, but Compass Properties is a family company, and we invest in communities. We're not developers that are just taking developer fees and moving on. And
that's what sets us apart. So I just wanted to kind of tell you about the macro world that I have to deal with, and where am I going to get the money? So I just wanted to say thank you for this opportunity.
Just going to add that Aaron from McGann Construction is on the Zoom, available for questions, and Dylan from JT Engineering, civil engineer, here as well.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here that is here to speak on behalf of this during the public hearing section? This is an opportunity for anybody from the public to speak as well. Okay?
We did receive a couple.
Yes. Yeah, I was just about to go. Yes. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. So we did receive 2 pieces of correspondence, or I received those by email, and I did share those with all the Plan Commission members. I'll just call out a couple of the details and the main elements for everyone following along, but the full details were shared with the Commission. So there was an email from Patrick Fessenbecker of 308 Nichols, who was in support of the project, supported more rental options in the city, asked about the ground floor retail space, if there was an opportunity for any more there, and supported additional bike facilities and infrastructure going into the project, including possible e-bike chargers, more bike racks, and such. Additionally, there was correspondence from Christy Goforth at 4515 Gordon Avenue in opposition to the project, citing the inaffordability, limited parking, and difficulty that brings with the high school parking, the street infrastructure, specifically some of the traffic analysis that has been done, some of the intersections that were discussed, as well as calling out some of the planning process, some of those details, and specifically some of the addressing and things like that, which I would be happy to address if the Commission would like me to. But the full correspondence was shared, and they were made aware that that would be put in the record.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay. With that, I will close the public hearing section and move to number 6B, consideration of action on the request for determination of conformance with the approved general development plan, GDP, for the site located approximately 4601 to 4711 Monona Drive between Springhaven and Dean Avenue for mixed-use development, case number 2-016-2021.
Thank you. I think first off, it's probably helpful just for everyone to kind of know what, there's a couple items here on the agenda for this, but specifically what this consideration would be before, moving into any further. So as mentioned, there is an approved general development plan for this project, which is sort of the overall plan for the project. And following that, there would be a possible precise implementation plan, PIP, that would subsequently be considered, where there's sort of more details that go into that. The GDP that was approved by City Council, was approved by Plan Commission last year. The applicant, as mentioned, had called out some of the changes that have been made with the changes in the development team and the project team having gone through this. And so this particular agenda item will sort of be looking at some of the changes since the approved GDP, and looking for some Commission direction in terms of the next steps and the possible conformance with the approved GDP specifically. And so we do have subsequent agenda items here for possible review of either the GDP or the PIP, depending which way the Commission chooses to go. But at this point, it'll be a little more focused specifically on that, the GDP conformance. So, as mentioned, the proposal here is from Compass Properties for the demolition of the existing buildings and construction of a 4-story mixed-use development along Monona Drive. The 2.2-acre site is bound by Springhaven Avenue to the north, Monona Drive to the east, Gordon Avenue to the west, and West Dean Avenue to the south. The GDP, as mentioned, was approved late last year, and this also has a tax increment financing TIF development agreement that was approved by the City Council. The change in development team has meant that these changes have come forward. Please note the neutral project is no longer involved with this project. The sort of framework that this GDP element will be reviewed within is Section 480-38 of the city's ordinance, discussing kind of some of the checks that would be made for the PIP, the precise implementation plan, as it relates to the GDP, and so that'll be referenced through the staff report here. The intent here from the architect and from the development team was really to retain elements of the approved GDP, maintaining it and making it economically feasible, as mentioned. And at this point, it will be the decision: is it the GDP that would need to be revised, or may it proceed with PIP? In terms of the changes, the units, firstly, the overall number of units has increased from 93 to 99. This does include the removal of the 10 townhomes along Gordon Avenue and the addition of 16 apartment units for the net increase of 6 units. And the density and the intensity of the site may not increase more than 10% from the GDP to the PIP per city ordinance. The increase in 6 units is an increase in 6.5% of the unit count, and the gross square footage is increased by 1.6%. As far as the unit mix, the applicants increased the number of studios and 2-bed units, while the 1-bedroom units have decreased. The 3 beds would roughly account for the townhomes. It's just a net increase there of 1 unit, so it's pretty much a wash. In terms of the commercial, the floor area for non-residential use may not increase by more than 10% per the ordinance between the GDP and PIP. The amount of dedicated retail space in this proposal has reduced from just under 11,000 square feet to 6,600 square feet. It still retains the BMO Harris Bank anchor at the southeast corner, facing Monona Drive, as well as the addition of the cafe co-working space at the northeast corner as well. Please note that some of the numbers, neither of these numbers that are listed here in the staff report include any of the tenant amenities such as fitness rooms and any of those types of products. In terms of the green space, the approved GDP had just under 30,000 square feet of open space at grade, which was 31%, and then additional 9,500 of green space on the green roof. The revised materials state 27.4% of the total site area will now be green space, which the math equates to just about 26,500 square feet. This reduction of nearly 11% is greater than allowed by the ordinance. I did reach out to the architect and to the project team. I understand that did not include pervious pavers or any of those types of elements, which the previous calculation did. So I would recommend either way some discussion of that and sort of making sure apples to apples comparisons are being made, as well as some possible remedies for that if the commission would be looking for more green space for the site. In terms of the setbacks and the site layout, the plans do mimic the approved GDP with a similar design used. The massing is closest to Monona Drive in sort of a U shape. The main departure here being the removal of the townhomes, which does give a greater buffer to the Gordon Avenue side to the west, and as mentioned, there would be some landscape green space there, the sort of surface parking as well, so the massing would really be much more to the east of the site. The architecture of the building, it would now be one building rather than two, sort of separated with the mid-block, and then again the removal of the townhomes. The entry canopy has been added along Monona Drive to give the sort of differentiation of use there. There was discussion sort of pre-application with the applicant about that and the differentiation of use just given the length of the block there, while also calling out the 2 retail spaces as well. So the materials, the sort of design there has helped with that, breaking it up and again recognizing some of the operational challenges, some of the building standards that would come from having the 2 separate buildings for something of this scale. The overall shape and orientation of the building is similar. Some step backs have been added and included with the western face on the 4th floor, stepping back. The footprint, as mentioned as well, the footprint is less than it was for the previously approved GDP. And again, the western face of the building is closer to the drive than it is to Gordon Avenue. There's an opportunity there, as you may recall from the GDP, there was sort of a step there from the 2nd floor up to the 4th. There was concern from the applicant of locating too close to Gordon Avenue, so there may be some discussion from the commission, and it may be subsequent discussion, but just about that and some of the step backs there to further limit the massing. As far as circulation, it would still remain with curb cuts on both the north and south of the site, with no curb cuts on either Gordon Avenue or Monona Drive. The cuts have been relocated just a little bit on both Springhaven and West Dean to assist with the design, but they do still allow for that one travel lane, sort of north-south, continuously throughout the site, as well as the drive-through as needed by the bank anchor tenants there as well. In terms of the parking, it's a net increase in one stall versus the approved GDP. The change in the commercial, as well as the change in the residential units, does mean that the applicant is looking for a very small exception from city standards of the parking. But please note that I believe 17 of the parking stalls are attributable to the bank, so there may be some use there, sort of some double counting of those stalls, for example, in the evenings and for visitor parking, and maybe something to discuss, again, as it relates to possibly to the green space as well. So with all that, the recommendation is discussion from the Commission in terms of the revised plans and their conformance with the GDP. Should they choose to move forward, then suggested findings of fact and conditions of approval are included in the staff report. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Okay. With that, I will open it up to Commission for discussion. Chris, do you want to start?
Sure. Clearly, this doesn't match the GDP we approve. So that goes without saying. It isn't that. So the only way to keep it, in my opinion, on a GDP track would be whatever the commission would agree to tonight that would get it on track, be added as conditions to this tonight, and then that's forwarded to the city council. That'd be the only way to approve or recommend a GDP tonight. So I'll start with what I think is missing, and then we'll see what everyone else thinks. For me, one of the biggest things is the missing commercial. We talked about this a lot during the approval process. This is a commercial node in Monona. Across the road is all commercial. Across Dean is commercial. The kitty corner is the golf course. And this is, if we're planning this city from scratch, this would be a commercial node. So I think to take the bird in hand of the bank and then a cafe co-working, which is really for your residents, it's let's face it, that's who's going to be in there, is not enough commercial on this space. So for me, I would want more commercial. I think it would give you the opportunity, if you had a couple units of commercial fronting on Monona Drive, to actually put a break in. I know your break, you want to have convenience to all these things, but there could be some type of a walkthrough somehow, especially if they're full depth and you pull all their stuff back, where you could get pedestrians between. This is a long, long block, and that's a lot of a straight face. There's some articulation, but it's a lot of four-story building along Monona Drive. And this would allow a chance to, at least at a pedestrian scale, not 2 stories, even 1 story, at a pedestrian scale, you could have a break there and have a few things going on that it doesn't seem like such a monolith, I think, at the pedestrian level. And I know you're talking about your ability to use this building with the commercial directly north of the BMO area. You might need to relocate where the fitness is, but you could have a break between the commercial and your residential areas. You'd access all your residential areas on the first floor, and the second floor goes across to everything as it is anyway, and it would be an easy way to put some type of a break in there and some type of a feature in there. I think clearly it needs more brick. We talked about that, nor masonry. We talked about that during the entire process. It doesn't have to be 100% brick like the project that we saw, but it needs more. The 2 corners and then nothing else isn't enough, especially on Monona Drive and West Dean. We have to figure out a way for articulation. It can be in design elements. Last project, step back the 4 corners. And that makes a big difference for what you see when you're approaching a building, when you don't see all 4 stories when you're coming out the 2 corners. I think there's opportunities to be able to do that somehow. Those are the biggies for me. I think something we would need to see is where that drive-through exit is. It seems like it got a lot closer to Monona Drive, did it? I'm sure it is. And we just want to see where it is and what kind of stacking room we have at that stoplight. I'm sure it got closer. It looks like it got closer. Does anybody know?
It did not get closer.
So it's the same spot where it was? Good.
Yes.
Just make sure, give us something when you come back that shows us where that was, because if that's the case, then the existing drive-through is even closer to Monona Drive, because what we'd had on the previous approval was getting the drive-through a little bit further back from that stoplight, so that would be terrific. Question, you say public art mural on Gordon. I'm not sure what you're considering or thinking about that. Anybody?
That was on Dean.
Dean,
It's
okay.
on the south side of the building. it's something that we've been discussing as an opportunity for both branding and public art. It was a painted mural on the masonry facade going up, basically from the second floor up to the roof line.
So I couldn't hear all that. It's on what we have?
Yeah. So it's the first one.
Really? I missed that.
Yeah, it's on the first rendering above the beam.
So it's more of a, okay, so it's just art. It's not so much, okay, got it. Some of the things I like that you've changed. I think the parking improved even more. I think it helps the neighborhood. We get rid of whatever it is now, 3 or 4 curb cuts. That allows more parking on the road. But not having those townhomes right up on Gordon really takes away even some of those residents wanting to park on Gordon. So I think if I were living there, that would be an advantage that these are moved off. If I were living there, I like the landscape buffer. It doesn't look big on the plan, but it's pretty substantial. And I think a lot of really neat things can be done, and we would ask for a lot of neat things on the PIP can be done there between berming and landscaping to both hide the headlights, but to create a really interesting area. And I'm not saying we hide the building, but your eye would go to the landscaping and the berm, and I like that. If I were a resident there, I would much prefer that, unless they want to see a house right there. But this gives them almost like a bit of a park landscape there to look across their home. I like that. I like what you did in the front with fences. We don't allow fences in the front of buildings. We have a few decorative ones, but not a totally fenced-in area, so I'm not sure how to make a way to do it. I think that helps a lot on the pedestrian aspect to have those fences, and I guess I'll add in the brick columns. Love them, but I think there'd be a few more of them along there. I think things like that, if you look at was it Fairway Glen, that really made a difference there to have those columns coming down and some landscaping. They have a few decorative fences. They just didn't make a totally fenced-in area. I think that really helps the look and feel of it from a pedestrian scale, which is a car scale too, on that front end. So I like what you did there. I think that's where I'll leave it for now. Again, for me, to approve this or to say this is an acceptable revision to the GDP, I would need to have staff's conditions and a few more. Just as a comment, permeable pavers don't in themselves count as green space. What happened on the other one, I think they're permeable, but they're also decorative landscape pavers where they had a patio or something. Permeable is water quality, but when we talk about green space, we talk about 30%, but then sometimes there's consideration made for, above and beyond landscaping type of features that say, yeah, this isn't exactly green space, but it's a real true amenity to the site, and it makes a big difference, and it gives you that feel that you want on a site. And that little cut through under there, if you could get one, would probably add some opportunities for green space too. But I like some of the things you've done. I think the things I mentioned are an issue for me.
Okay, Corey?
I agree. I was, a bit surprised, I guess, when I got the packet, and I feel like it is very different in character than what we've been talking about for a couple of years. And I understand the reasons that is happening, I think, a little bit, but it's disappointing, I guess. I'm not in your business, so I don't know what's economically feasible, but I'll echo some of Chris's comments. Part of what was so exciting about the project was the mixture. It wasn't just a 4-story apartment building along Monona Drive. I mean, this is an area where there was going to be multiple retail opportunities. We heard a lot from the community, from the neighborhood, about there was the small businesses that are now displaced, and that this would potentially be an opportunity for them to come back in. And so to have, like Chris said, just a cafe that really you're calling co-working space, it really probably will be primarily the residents. So there's not a lot of additional retail here. I also, I understand the townhomes may not be as economically feasible, but one of the things that was appealing to me about the project was we've talked a lot about diversity of housing types in Monona, and we just had a housing report. This is not on you, but it raises the question again. When we were looking at the housing report, looking at the mixture of housing types in Monona, this project and the townhomes that were a part of it were one of the things that were highlighted. So just putting 3-bedroom apartments, yes, the townhomes were 3-bedroom, but it's not the same. So I guess this is a question more for Doug and the city, perhaps. Just if there's a TIF and there's some funding that's been approved, but the GDP is now in question, I guess I'm not sure how that all works.
So as far as the agreement, the ownership change and those things, and the project, the ask has not changed. That's remained constant. So as far as the CDA, I'm keeping the chair informed of what's happening, and certainly City Council will know as well. But the ask has not changed. The guarantees and all of those things that are part of this. So I would suggest the applicant has probably been working to that a little bit as well, knowing what is available and what has been offered. But that would not necessarily be changing with this. But they do need to go together, of course.
Mm-hmm.
When you say they go together, they go back to CDA since the project's changed, and now CDA would have to take a look at it again?
Not as I see it, because the ask has not changed, and sort of the guarantees and those elements and the structure of the deal would remain constant. I would certainly, I've been keeping the CDA chair informed.
Okay. So that's his call?
Sorry?
That's Tom's call?
Yes,
then?
it would be.
And that's just to clarify, Doug, you're saying if we were to get to a place with this, that the we felt like it was close enough to the original GDP in terms of our ordinance that in a sense the GDP holds, then it wouldn't have to go back to CDA. But if, in fact, we said we can't swallow this and we need to dial back to look at a different GDP, then because isn't the agreement with CDA specific to approval of the GDP?
So it would need the GDP element to be included,
right.
Certainly. So the approvals would need to be there. As Chris mentioned, the chair would be informed of this,
right.
And they have an interest, of course, what's happening
right.
with this, but. As I spoke to him, it was really sort of the metrics of this, the units, the sort of the agreements, the performance in place, were those to remain. He was comfortable with it. So
okay.
That's sort of my expectation now. If any of that changes, of course, it would go
right.
back for further discussion.
Right. Thank you.
I guess I'll just ask, in looking at reworking this, did you put any consideration into having some non-market rate units into this building?
No, we have not. This is a market rate development.
The decrease in the open space is also a concern to me. I do think the landscaping would look nice, but yeah, the pervious pavers would not equal the green space. So if there was we have given some exception, I guess, when there's been roofs, like green roofs that are landscaped and have an aesthetic, is that the right word? Aesthetic, that where they're adding to the beauty of the site, or adding in some of that landscaping. But this is more of a parking lot with some landscaping around it. And I don't know what would happen in that garden area. It just says garden area, dog run. So it could just be a lawn. I don't know that would really meet I think for like a PIP, we'd want to see something a little bit more inventive there. I didn't see a lot of information about bikes as well. That would be something we'd be looking for. I didn't see maybe it was there and I just missed it, but I didn't see bike parking like along the front or along the back. That's pretty important. I do think I like the circulation pattern that you have. It does seem a little bit more straightforward. I know that was something that we worked a lot on at the last plan. There was a little bit more complication about how the drive would work. Yeah, I think that's all I have for now. I'm curious to hear what others have to say.
Susan?
Yeah, I don't disagree with a lot of what's been said. I was also disappointed about the townhouses because that was one of the features I really liked about the other. But the trade-off, but I understand the financial constraints, and also the trade-off is, I mean, my thought about those was, first of all, it was the different type of housing, and also it kind of fit in to some degree with the homes across the street. The trade-off is the more robust landscaping and a nice, green space, which I think is a positive. The other piece that a couple pieces that I was struggling with is to me, the 30% green space is pretty minimum. I mean, that is our minimum, and that's pretty minimal. On the other hand, taking out a couple of parking stalls, and I'm not really sure how much opportunity you have to work with that. I guess I'd take another look at that if there is a way to get any more there, because the parking is so close, and we've already talked about, I don't think there's not been any action taken yet on reviewing the ordinance, but the fact that our parking standards are pretty high, seem, that there is some room for flexibility, and you have the zip car. And I see you have a bike room for storage here, but I would agree there should be some placement of bike racks, and it's more of a PIP thing, I guess. And the other thing would be potentially EV charging when you put the lot in for cars and bikes, really. I mean, a couple of EV charging spaces possibly for cars, but then also for bicycles. The garden area, I don't know if the idea of that was to allow tenants to garden. I'm not sure I can't remember what the idea of that was, if that was going to be sort of a community garden, but the dog run seems like a good idea, and that is some more open green space also where people can sit, so that's a plus. I agree the circulation pattern looks better. It's more direct, makes more sense. You have nothing coming off Gordon Avenue. It does, as Chris mentioned, add more parking for neighbors on Gordon Avenue as well. It doesn't take away, rather, I guess is the way to say it. I also was disappointed. One of the things I liked about the previous building was the amount of brick. There was more brick, and I liked the color. So I'm not nuts about what looks like some increased efficient, but is this brick on the back too, the back corner? I guess it is, yes. Where the commercial area is. Okay, so there is some brick there. I do like.
There's brick at the base. It's the majority of the building as well too. There's a brick course down at the base, so
okay.
There is more than just at the corners.
So along the front of Monona Drive, that part, yeah.
Right.
And I do like the fencing and the landscaping that you've done along the driveway. I think that's attractive. They had done, there was some stepping back even along the driveway. I just don't see how you can do it. I mean, I'm gathering that you kind of need this number of tenants to make the numbers work at this point too. And I like the idea of brightening up that south side, I guess it is, with a mural. And I kind of like the idea of this mural. I mean, I sort of like the generic, just kind of abstract coloring that would go, whatever you come up with that. That's obviously not our call, but so there are some things I like about it. I guess the main things would be just rethinking green space if there's anything. Certainly when you come back with a developed landscaping plan, a very robust one. For me, it wouldn't be make or break to add more brick. I always like more brick, but I think this is an attractive building. I don't think, other than the e-bikes and the parking, that's what I had. This question was type of masonry. I think otherwise, that's about it. I don't really have a lot. I think it's disappointing in some ways, the changes, but on the other hand, it's a reasonably attractive building. I guess, thinking about the cafe, I've always been a little ambivalent about that. I understand the need to have more commercial. We also hear that it's hard to fill some of that, so maybe give some more thought to that. It does sound like the cafe, I had a question about what the cafe co-worker space is. I assume that is more for,
Yeah, I guess
tenant
our
use?
idea, if you're familiar, is to do something similar to the Rotunda Cafe in the
okay,
neighborhood.
okay.
So it's kind of the intent that we're going in with.
That's right, because we even talked about maybe putting a space for a podcast, kind of, we had that discussion, but yeah, that's
The
right,
in-
okay.
the intent is to have a full paying retail tenant that's operating. That
Okay.
can utilize the co-working space free while they're open, and after they close, that co-working space is still available after hours for the
For
tenants.
tenants, okay.
But this is not a tenant amenity. We fully
Right.
expect to make money off of that. And I've been in the retail market for 24 years and a member of the International Association of Shopping Centers for 20. And we had a huge portfolio of retail, and right now it's kind of tough.
Right.
The commercial market slid, and then retailers require basically 7 stalls per 1,000 square feet for parking. That's common. That's a common number. And we had shopping centers all over the state, and we pulled that back out of our portfolio. We're doing more residential, and that's why there's less commercial
Right.
in there. If you're adding more, you need more parking. So, but the average is 7 per 1,000. And then the breezeway, I respect that, but this is not the current and Buck and Honey's that goes out to the water. I feel like a breezeway here would be a breezeway to nowhere. You know what I'm saying? So just from efficiency standpoint, green standpoint, you have more exposed areas to the cold and insulation, and what are these people walking through to? And I think it's a breezeway to nowhere. So that's my only comment.
Susan, do you have any, do you have a sense of, as it relates to the breezeway or the cut through in the building? Do you have a given the length of the building?
I guess I don't see it as an essential thing. I mean, to me, it doesn't make a lot of sense, probably from what you just said. I mean, it might add to the look, but I don't think it's, to me, for me, it's not a crucial thing. I guess I wouldn't expect it.
So, one of the advantages of being the last to go is that everybody else has already said just about everything that was on my mind, except for a few things. Commercial, I completely understand that the commercial market is soft. It's hard to find tenants right now. I've seen spaces in Sun Prairie in new construction sit empty for almost 5 years now, and there's no tenants in those spaces, and they just continue to remain empty. But what I really liked about the old project was the business incubator idea, to have flex space in there, so you can have less expensive retail for businesses that may be starting out. And I would like to potentially see something like that exist, or maybe it is flex space that when the market turns around at some point, you can then take some of those areas that are currently being used as co-working or whatever, but potentially convert that into commercial space again in some fashion. I see the increase in density, but there's no increase in affordability, even though we're working on efficiencies in the construction of the building. I mean, do we have an idea of what the rents are going to be? Are they going to be the same as what was listed before, or have we
Approximately.
approximately the same as before? So, okay, so that's it. The massing of the building too on Gordon. I liked when it was. I would like to see it set back a little bit more on that top floor, if possible. I don't know if it is possible with the way that this project has fleshed out at this point, but I think that helps quite a bit. And I know that's going back to the architect and having more renders done and working on more costs. But the e-bike charging incorporated into the bike room or elsewhere on the property was something that I think is important, and people are using that more. And the landscaping, I'd like to see more green space, even at the expense of some parking perhaps. I mean, we're talking about public transportation potentially being available in that corridor with Zipcar and all these other things. There might be some flexibility in parking, I don't know. Mentioned the step back. Let's see. Let's see. You got the solar, you got the efficiency, public arts. Yeah, I guess I don't have all that much more besides that, you know, thinking about the flex space there. And I like the buffer, the bigger buffer between the building and Gordon. I think that helps a little bit, but I also bemoan the loss of the townhouse concepts and the housing diversity that the other project might have brought to that area of Monona. So, that said, I think that's about all I have right now.
Thank you.
Well, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just thinking that the club room, I don't remember where, I would assume with something like this, you would want a club room where it was in the other place, but it seems like, you know, if you were going to increase, have some flex space, that in that cafe club room, I mean, that area might be a place to do that, but I assume that you looked at it, there's no other good place to put a club room. I mean, you'd lose at least a studio unit, I suppose, by doing that.
Yeah, and we've also talked about including some individual private offices for rent within the co-working cafe space also.
Okay.
That would serve as that business
Okay,
incubator
so there
type
might be
space.
some of that. All right. Sorry, Nancy.
Yeah, I guess I would come down hoping for more commercial as well, or expecting more commercial as well. I understand that it's difficult now, and there's definitely spaces open, but we're just seeing this corridor explode. I don't have to tell you that. I mean, there's construction within spitting distance in every direction, and including a very large building on the corner of, you know, Cottage Grove and Monona Drive, and you know, and I mean, just the amount of development that we've seen on Monona Drive, and it'd be kind of, I mean, I'm not seeing vacancies on East Wash as an example, you know, or, you know, so I just, with the density that's starting to happen in an area, which I think is a good thing for not only for Monona but Madison in that corridor. You know, it's just hard for me to imagine that, and then the commercial and the rest of that area, it's just hard for me to imagine that it wouldn't be an attractive commercial space. Whereas I could see where some of those other commercial spaces would be less attractive. And I guess on the cut through of the building, I just think it's a convenience factor. If I lived in that building and I had to walk all the way down that long block to get to BMO, or to get to, you know, or if I was coming from the high school and had to, you know, and I was on the other end of the building and I had to walk all the way around to I mean, because there wasn't a way for me to get to the back of the building. It just seemed, it's, you know, just think there's an advantage to having at least, as Chris said, a single-story walk-through, you know, somewhere mid-block, cut through the building. I mean, even if it's not two buildings, I mean, it can't be that difficult to float a walk-through for one story. It's not like you're taking out a lot of square feet. Or for that matter, utilizing a lot of extra energy because you've got residents have the ability to walk through to the other side without going all the way around the building. And, you know, I would just say it from a PIP standpoint, because this is more of a PIP issue, I do think that the building is still sort of monochromatic. Between, you know, there's not that much, I mean, we couldn't even notice took us, it was, we struggled a bit to figure out which was brick and which wasn't, because everything is sort of the same color. So as you look towards the PIP, if we get there, I would like to see some more contrast in terms of the materials, colors, and use. But the primary things for me are and I also always like to see more articulation in the building, and if that's corner setbacks, if you could squeeze a little bit out there, that would be great. But in terms of the GDP, for me, it would be, the cut through in the commercial. So anybody else have anything else to add before we close the public hearing? Yep.
I forgot to mention, one thing I really like that you did is add those balconies. We asked about that previously, and I think it's a great amenity for every apartment. And if you can figure out a way to have a little more depth on some of those, so you can set a table or something like that, that would be better yet. But I think that's a good addition.
Yeah, and I would just say, because I was focusing on the things that I didn't like, that I too, while I bemoan the loss of the townhouses some, I actually do think the setback from Gordon and the more green and what you've done on the backside is better, and the flow is definitely better. So I think there's some real upside to what's been presented here overall. So with that, we will close the public hearing.
Or not in public hearing.
Sorry.
We're gonna mention item-
Sorry. I checked the wrong box. Yeah. So I will, so I guess the question is, this was a consideration of action, right? We're on B, 6B. So is there consideration on the conformance? Do I have a motion? Chris?
Well, for me, to make a motion, I would have additional conditions from what staff wrote about some of the things we talked about tonight. And they'd be somewhat vague, okay? For example, I say it needs more masonry. I'm not telling you where to put it, but look at it. And it needs a little more, well, we're not proving the final material, final colors and stuff, so that is a
Right.
PIP item.
Right.
I would say it needs more commercial. And I would say it needs more articulation on the building. Now, if you can get a walkthrough in there, if you can do other ways, set back corners, I would leave it vague so it leaves you some ability for design. But I couldn't approve it tonight or pass the GDP through the way it's presented right now, because it's too different from what we approved. So I guess before we even worry about a motion, I mean, here's what it does. It gives you an approved GDP, which is what you want, but it's a bit vague from a normal GDP, because I'm saying it needs to have this, this, and this. You listen to everybody, and you know whether or not you feel you can create a consensus. So you know what we're talking about. What it does do is keep you in the PIP phase, which comes back, and the PIP, there's a lot of details we don't have, and I know that's our next discussion, but I mean, I wouldn't have put a lot of details together for tonight because you don't know how we're going to act. But I mean, we need stormwater, we need engineering, we need grades, there's so many things. And then, of course, some of the things we're talking about tonight, the bike racks, whether there's a charging station for the bikes and the cars and all that stuff, that's all PIP stuff. You've heard it before, and you've heard it again tonight. So if this happened, if the commission did agree to approve it, that's what you'd have, but it'd be a little vague. You wouldn't have exact certainty on what you're doing. You might lose a few units to make this work, but you would have an approval that tells you if you can come back and make it work like this, then we would consider it going to the PIP. You'd have your GDP approval. So,
Well, and I would also just add to that there's several members missing tonight.
yeah.
So even if we,
If you
came up
GDP,
with.
it's approved, though.
Right, but so I'm saying, even if we came up with a relatively vague approval in terms of the changes we wanted to see for GDP, that doesn't necessarily mean that everything would hold, I mean, it would, obviously, if we passed it, it would hold, but I'm just saying, not knowing what the other members think. The downside is if we don't do something tonight, you could come back later and the other members would feel totally different. differently, and, but, you know, I think it, you know, I guess it depends on how comfortable the commission feels being vague.
I think
But-
vague
but
is
we
okay for, you can tell we're detail people, right?
Right.
That's what we do. So vague doesn't hurt us as much as a developer. You don't
Right.
have exactly, well,
Exactly.
how much more
Exactly.
brick
So
and
that's
how much
where I was
articulation.
Finishing, I was going to say, it depends on how
But you
comfortable
do
we are
have an
and you
approved
are.
GDP.
Right.
And we've valued and engineered this as much as we can. And just a little background, I'm the preferred developer for BMO Harris in Wisconsin. And I've done 6 locations. I own the Middleton branch, and we've got big plans for that. And they want a new branch. And if we can't make this residential mixed use feasible, we certainly could put a strip mall on that property, scale this way back and get BMO a new branch. But I promised them a new branch. We've been talking for 4 years to try to put this together. And I'd much rather see some housing that's desperately needed in Dane County than a standalone BMO Harris location, and that's what they've wanted from the beginning. And I had to fight them on that. There's been multiple meetings, conference calls, all the way up to Toronto on this project. And I just need you all to understand that we have squeezed this as hard as we can to make this work. Otherwise, it's going to have to get scaled back just to a branch. And, you know, we're coming up on some deadlines with the Antique Mall and SNCS, and we need to have some resolution here, or we're pulling the plug, and we're just going to move ahead with a BMO branch. And I just want to be completely transparent with you guys, and not waste your time. But when you're adding brick and masonry and breezeways, it just
Right.
chisels it away. And we've been working closely with Aaron Kostyczka at McGann, and I have a relationship that goes back 20 plus years with Kubala Washako, and did a big TIF retail project in the city of Marshfield 20 years ago. And they do great work. And that's why we got rid of the architects of Mexico City. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of background where we're coming from. We really have put our best foot forward. And I'm very aware of the real estate market and my team. Commercial is radioactive right now. Banks don't want to touch it. You can't lend on it, and then you have the parking issues with it. So when you're asking for more commercial, you're asking for more parking, less apartments, and makes it unfeasible. And then we're back to, you know, putting up a BMO branch, big blue BMO branch. And let me tell you, I scaled back the blue on those guys big time. I don't know if you remember some of the renderings, but
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
But
Haunts our dreams.
our family, our companies have a very, very deep relationship with BMO Harris.
Right.
So, and like I said, they're our #1 priority, and they want a new branch. And so,
Right.
I just wanted you
Right.
to understand the background.
Right.
Let me ask you this.
Well, let me just say, from our standpoint, I'm sure you're aware, because you do know the background and you were on this project from the very beginning. We spent more time on this project than any other project we've had in the city in a long time, too.
And I
So,
want to say,
believe me,
I
we would like
personally,
to have it resolved as well.
I personally apologize for that and had other projects going on.
Yeah.
And trusted this co-developer, which, by the way, is a developer, okay? My family and our company, we invest in communities long-term.
Right.
And you can look at the city of Wausau, we've done, 3, 4 city blocks there. And we're buy and hold forever. We're not here today, gone tomorrow.
Right.
Let me ask you this. Out of the feedback that you heard tonight, what are you comfortable with? Or what modifications can you be comfortable with? Because I guess that would be a good,
This is more maybe Aaron and Matt, but, and another thing, a third of developments in our country have had the plug pulled on them. Done, just because of interest rates and construction costs. Just so you're aware. So when you're adding more brick and more this and more that, we're just going to be another one of those numbers right now. I guess I'd turn it over to Matt and Aaron, and what would work in our budget.
Hey, everybody, this is Aaron. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, I mean, I think all the points are really well taken. And it seems to me that every one of them is things that we had kind of worked through as a team here. You know, the walkthrough, I think the challenging thing there is it adds, you know, I understand the circulation, right? We've built plenty of buildings. You're all familiar with the current, which I own. It's just a different dynamic, and with the commercial there, you'd have to be pretty strategic about where that goes. And the thought is, I think to your point, Nancy, you know, if anybody's going through there, they're most likely going to be a tenant. And they just go through the main entry and they walk through with their key fob, and they get out the back. And so, I mean, that's just one of the things. I think the brick, I thought Matt did a nice job of a mix, and I think between brick and cement board siding and panels, and I think it's pretty consistent with the higher end market rate projects we're doing. And I think to Tyler's point, the part of the challenge right now is making these projects, you know, economically feasible with the high interest rates. You know, I mean, we all know that interest rates went up 450 basis points last year, and construction costs have not eased at all. You know, just, you know, as a data point, like if you took an apartment building like this and, you know, around 100 units, electrical, I don't know, 16 to 18 months ago would have cost about $11,000 a unit. Now it's $16,000. And we've actually had a little bit of relief in lumber and some other things, but it just there hasn't been anything to change that. And I think, you know, taking the key points that, because I've also been involved in this project for years, kind of behind the scenes more so, pricing things out. And, you know, there's no way that, you know, unless we were right downtown, I just don't see how you could make the numbers work with, you know, like 80% masonry. I think the you know, the goal here from our perspective is to do something that's really nice, and, you know, it's maintenance free, it's going to look good forever. It's, you know, consistent with other high-end market rate projects that are really the competition for the project. So it's full. And yeah, I mean, those are kind of my key points. I'd pass it off to Matt because he's been, you know, he could probably speak a little bit more to what's actually feasible for step backs, and he's probably got some thoughts on the walkthrough as well. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think I echo a lot of Aaron's concerns. You know, the pass-through is something we've talked about, we've heard, and we've kind of evaluated. And I think my biggest concern with that is more from an urban standpoint in a lot of ways too, is I don't know what the connection is. Like I've done buildings with that, you know, but it's usually based on there's a reason to do it that's bringing you into the site. You know, and I think that's the hang up on, you know, where I think from an urban standpoint, I think it, you know, whether it makes sense or not, it definitely adds cost, right? It's more skin, it's breaking up of systems. You can't run anything across that really. You know, you've got to add more complex construction over your low level parking. And, you know, so it definitely adds a lot of things that, you know, we were asked to really try to pull out and reduce in order to make the project feasible. So that one I think is a challenge. I think the brick, you know, our approach with it is was and has been to, put those higher dollar items where, we think they make some of the most impact, which is why, we started with them at the corners. Those corners, project higher up. They're the tallest elements on the building. So it has the greatest impact, and from an urban standpoint, it's anchoring those intersections that, are important to cities. I think the other thing is that, the other spot where we're using it is at the base of the building, kind of through most of the middle of it and, between those corners. And that's, again, where people are going to be interacting with it. It's where those terraces and patios and the decorative landscape fencing and things like that. It's, again, kind of an anchor and a backdrop to those areas that, again, is where people are at. So we're trying to use it in impactful ways that both from an urban standpoint and from a user standpoint. So I think, from a design standpoint, we consider ourselves to be problem solvers. So we're open to that idea of looking at these challenges. But I do think, with the economics of things that we're seeing in what we do, and we do a fair amount of this work as well too, it's tough to make them work. And so I would have concerns about that. And the viability of it, but that's Compass's, kind of area of expertise.
So I'm going to go back to Patrick's question, because I'm sitting.
Yeah.
The answer is,
Well, exactly. I don't think we got an answer, except for maybe we really weren't here to discuss much. You just want an up or down vote from us on what you presented here. 'Cause it doesn't sound like you're budgeting
Things
at all.
we can do, and are planning on doing is, electric vehicles are important. I own 2 e-bikes, and that to me personally is important, as well as electric vehicles. And we're going to have 100% of EV ready. Yeah, we're going to pre-build EV ready for all the parking in this project. So we're going to be running the conduit and everything. And Aaron's done this before. And any of the green things, sustainability is a big deal for us. That's why we're doing the first mass timber project here in Madison. And those things we can incorporate into it. But I think when it comes to, the breezeway things, I mean, we can massage a lot of this green stuff. And we put one of the first solar arrays on an office building on one of our properties in the research park years ago. So that's something that we embrace and can certainly include in that. It's just when it just comes down to, parking stalls, commercial space, and, just pure construction costs, that's where the challenge is. Did you have any other ideas? I mean, green roof is a great idea. I was on the board of the Children's Museum for 8 years, so I was on the building committee. I bought the building, and then I hired Cabal Washako and did the green roof up there. I don't know how many years ago that was, Matt, but I was on that committee with Findorf, and so I love that, and that's something we certainly can incorporate, and finding more green space I think is important. But it's just like just the numbers have to work for this project to happen. But I think like the little things like you were saying, the bike racks, and obviously there's got to be bike racks, and charging for bikes and charging for cars.
Expanding the balconies, make them bigger, we can do that.
And I like the fences, like you do, with the units. I mean, there's a lot of people that have pets or little children that might want to have that protection and a little gate. I think those little issues we can work around and figure out a way to work together on. But when it comes to breezeways and doing all masonry
And like I said, I take full responsibility, and I'm extremely sorry I let this thing go on for so long. And I want to apologize to all of you for it, okay? I should have stepped in earlier. So, I don't know. Any other questions, or Matt, I don't know if you want to add anything?
Yeah, like, I think just to what Tyler said, yeah, I think there's a lot of the small things we're definitely able to work on, but it's going to be hard to commit to anything beyond that.
Okay, I understand prices have gone up and all that, but I have to remind the commission, dollars is never a thing that we use to make planning decisions, right? I mean, we don't, that's why we never deal with dollars. We have to do what we think is good planning. So you heard everybody speak, and everyone was disappointed, and nobody liked it the way it is presented tonight. So we have two chances tonight. We can either just say it doesn't meet the GDP, or we can say we'll consider it meets the GDP with these additional conditions, and that's really the only two choices we have tonight.
Well,
Can we discuss the conditions?
Well, I guess I would like to clarify. I don't like it as well as some of the rest of the previous one, because there was more brick on the other one, which I like, but I also understand the issue. The breezeway is just not a thing for me. I would not vote against this because of the lack of a breezeway. In fact, that makes
Nor would
sense.
I.
It doesn't really make any logical sense.
It
to me,
actually,
Tyler.
for me,
So I'm sorry. I don't think it adds anything. I mean, to me, to walk a block, and I was thinking the same thing. If you're a resident, you're going to go through that hallway. You don't need, members of the public aren't going to walk through a breezeway anyway, most likely. So I just don't think that's a thing. So my only thing was I liked some of the setbacks and stuff on the other one better. I didn't say I don't like this one. And I do like, the balconies are a huge addition. I mean, they're a big plus to this, I think. I was actually concerned about the last one, which I didn't think about it till you mentioned that, about the lack of balconies, and if you can make them a little bigger without adding costs, that's probably better. I also said, and I still will say again, I feel more ambivalent than some of you do about the commercial space, because I am seeing what's happening around town, which is not getting rented, and that concerns me, and I just, so I don't have as big an issue with that personally, for what that's worth.
I would ask, how many spaces do you see open in this commercial node? I'm not aware of any. I think this area of Monona, and if we want to plan,
right.
plan for Monona, we have to do what works for Monona. And this area of Monona right now, they're all full. And as you know, the more commercial places you have, the more people want to be there. I think it's important when we're wiping out so much commercial. I mean, all we're replacing is the bank garage. We're wiping out Snicks and the antique mall, and it's important that we have more commercial here. I think for me, it's a deal breaker to not have some more commercial here.
And then how?
And I don't see it empty right here in this area. I just don't.
And then in terms of more parking added, we would need to reconsider that.
Well, it really depends on what they do. That's why I wanted to leave it a little vague. I don't want to sit here tonight and say, you have to have X more. I never said 80% masonry. I said you need some more masonry. There's not a lot of masonry on the building, the two corners. I never said you had to have 80% masonry. And as far as the commercial, it depends on what it is. If it's incubator spaces, I'm all in favor of that. If we have some incubator space, and that doesn't take a lot of people. And if there's incubator space, there might be some shared parking with BMO or some of the apartment dwellers and stuff. That's why I said if we leave a more vague condition, the condition wasn't going to be you have to have 4,000 square feet more commercial. The condition was going to be you need more commercial. And it allows the developer to have some flexibility in how they want to change this around and plan it. As far as the walkthrough, the condition would be more articulation of the building, whether it's a walkthrough, you do some more things on the facade to add interest, you step back the corners along Monona Drive and Dean. Those are all options you have. It's not saying you have to do one or the other. It says a little more interest here. And some of the stuff you do at the ground floor helps with that. But that's the predicament we're in tonight, because we don't have anything before us. We have a couple renderings, and I don't blame you. I wouldn't put any more work into it if I were you either, because why would you spend a bunch of money on architectural if you didn't know where we're at? It puts us in a predicament on what we approve.
Right.
Because once we approve a GDP, it is approved. We cannot take it back.
Right.
Well, unless it expires.
Right, yeah, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Angie, by the way. I'm Angie Black. I'm land use counsel for the developer. I just have a question. just a clarification. So the GDP is already approved for the project, but the changes in front of you are sort of for an interpretation as to whether those changes fit within the approved GDP.
Correct.
So I just wanted to clarify in terms of the action that you're considering and any conditions that may or may not be acceptable. Would those be in the form of, they're going to be somewhat vague conditions that would then be articulated in a PIP submittal? Because we haven't applied for amendment to the GDP, and it's not the original GDP application. So I just want to be clear procedurally about how things would go next.
I think it's a good question. And you must be an attorney.
I am. I'm only
perfect.
an attorney, so and I know the city's attorney well. So, and we have had this sort of conversation, and I know I've roped Doug in a few times. So I just, I'm not trying to advise you as an attorney, but I'm asking the question because I want us to all come out of here with a clear understanding of what we did or what we didn't do or what was approved or not approved. Because
We're
it's
total
different.
thumbs up on that.
It's different.
We appreciate the clarity as well.
I think it's a great question. I think you heard the commission says it is not the same project as it stands right now, and it doesn't meet the GDP. What we're trying to craft is we'll say, we believe this would meet the GDP if these additional conditions, most of which, all of which were in the original proposal, were met. Then with those, then at that point, there wouldn't be significant enough changes where the planning commission would say you start over. Is that?
I think so. I think that makes sense to me, and I understand what you're saying.
But otherwise, it's just come back and we'll start the GDP process over again.
Right.
So we're saying if this proposal would come back in the PIP form with some form of these conditions, we would consider that to be in compliance with the original GDP. Now, is it perfect? No. We don't have townhomes. We got deep 3-bedroom apartments. We have a lot of things that have changed, but we're saying it feels like the GDP we approved with those additional conditions. I don't know any other way to put it.
No,
If those additional conditions are met, then we feel it still approves. It still meets approval.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And I think that gives us two options then next. One would be, if we're nervous and we're not sure, we'd come back more for an advisory review. If we're pretty sure and we feel like we've nailed it, then we would come back and have sort of the same dialogue, but we'd put a PIP in front of you that would address those items, sort of one or the other ways of approaching that. Does that sound right?
That would work. If I were you, I would come back with a PIP pre-hearing, right? We could consider tonight it, but you're not ready for it. We can still give you direction on the PIP part, but if I were you, I wouldn't invest all that money into it. I'd say, here, we've made some changes. We feel that this meets it, and we want to have a pre-hearing conference and see if you feel it meets it. That make sense?
Understood.
And then at that point, if it all works out, then I would get all the detailed engineering analysis and everything else that you have to pay extra money for, and I'd get that all done to come in for a PIP approval if we agreed on the initial pre-hearing conference. Doug? Agreed?
I would agree. I would say the intent and the way that this was noticed and those elements was really within in the lens of the previously approved GDP and sort of checking against that. These suggested conditions and any potential action would be elements to get it to that point, as Chris said, because this was almost viewing it as sort of the 480-38 is really how does the PIP align with the GDP, and so it's really it's not at that point yet, but how does it get to that point? As mentioned, if you choose to come back and discuss the GDP separately, it would be a new one, but I see this as sort of within the framework of the previous.
So they're more like strong suggestions than actual formal actions.
No. They're conditions of the approval we would put on tonight, which would allow us, if it came back and it didn't meet what we were hoping for, would allow us to say this isn't what we approved as a GDP. So normally we would have specific actual numbers, but we don't have enough to put numbers on. And really, this is odd, but we're allowing you the most flexibility we can by doing this. because you're in an unusual situation where you're trying to save a project, but maybe make it come to the vision of what you want to have and what you want to own for a project. How's that?
I agree with that.
And what Doug was trying to do by setting up the meeting like this, he was trying to save you a bunch of steps of going back to scratch.
And we really appreciate it.
So this is just, I'd have raised my hand if I were your attorney too. Now, what the heck's going on?
Right.
We're not approving a GDP. We're approving the fact that we believe with a few adjustments, this would be in conformance with the GDP. We approved and we would go ahead with a PIP, but one of the conditions would be that you need to come back for a PIP approval, because there was a PIP approved, correct? No. Oh, well, there was, well, okay, that doesn't matter. But you'd still have to come back for a PIP approval, but it wouldn't put you backwards in the process. And the worst thing you have, if it doesn't work, then you go through the GDP process again, but it costs you time.
Yeah, we have.
I know.
Yeah.
We don't want to do that. We don't have time.
That's why we're at right now,
Yeah.
but I think you want to be open and transparent. We want to be
Yeah,
transparent.
absolutely. And we've got $750,000 in soft costs. I did a build to suit for BMO in Milwaukee, and I sold that in January. And we're doing a 1031. So Compass is acquiring the BMO property by July 18th per the 1031 exchange.
Sure, 6 months.
And I have tremendous pressure from BMO to get them a new branch. So, I appreciate you and all of you kind of shortcutting things and helping us out
Right.
and being flexible in this process, because we have time constraints that,
Sure.
we're dealing with
Right.
on our end. And like I said, I take full responsibility, and I apologize to all of you. I should have stepped in this last year. I actually did not like the design. It was an Aztec monolithic building, and these two young guys from Mexico City were building a Mexico City building, not a Monona building, in my opinion. No balconies, but again, thank you for allowing us to be flexible and open, and yeah.
Corey?
So Patrick had asked a question, and you answered. I mean, we talked a lot about the masonry and the breezeway, which those two things are not things that give me pause about. I actually think it looks nice the way it is. I don't think it needs that much more brick, but I have different opinions. But he did raise the point of what about the incubator space, because I do think that was something that we all, it would add to this. And so you talked about how doing some more green space, that was also something that I would like to see more of. You seem to think that was feasible, but what about adding more commercial? Is that out of the question as well?
Again, if it's crafted vaguely, which is to say it could be incubator. We're not saying that it has to be
Incubator, whatever, yeah.
a buck and honey. We're not saying
Right.
that you're, right.
Can I ask another question? Because I think Patrick had a good suggestion, but I want to make sure I understood it correctly. What I thought I heard you say was some portion of the space on the first floor, even if it's purposed for something today, would be designed and constructed so that it could be repurposed for incubator space or whatever you want to call it when the market and opportunity is there.
Yes, not necessarily the incubators, not as incubator space, but
Right.
my intent was that
Some type of commercial
recognizing
retail.
that there is softness in commercial. I mean, I had two projects that we were working on fall through and back out of. Understanding that, but designing for the future in the sense that, it will rebound, it always does, and being able to repurpose some of that space to commercial in the future.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. So I would just kick it back to you to answer the question, but I wanted to clarify that because I thought it was a good idea, and I think it sort of addresses both sides of the issue.
Yeah, we were intending to have more of a rotunda cafe. I don't know if you've seen that, but also have some private offices so that you have conference rooms that you can have meetings in. And a lot of people are working from home, but yet they need to have meetings. So they have small conference rooms, big conference rooms, they have workstations, they have, you know, offices, and that is kind of the look we're going for. And Matt was telling me about this, you know, verbally, and I'm like, I don't get it. So he actually dragged me down there, and I went to the Rotunda with him, and then boom, okay, I get it. And it is like incubator space, especially if you have private offices and conference rooms, and you know, food and beverage is always great, and they have an operating tenant that does breakfast and lunch in there, and that's our intent. But we might be able to add some incubator type offices for people, and they could be rented by the month or by the hour, depending on what the market bears. But it allows for commercial space, you know, to be there in the future if one tenant wanted to take it out. You know, we've got, you know, at our peak, probably about 1.5 million square feet of commercial space throughout Wisconsin. And I've been in the real estate industry a long time, and the commercial market's not good. I applied at Harvard Business School twice in the last 6 years, and this year they finally let me in. It's a CEO program at Harvard, and it's very visionary, and you have the leading experts telling you what the future is going to be, and commercial's not really that promising right now, and the banks aren't financing it right now. They don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. But I, just going back to Corrine and Patrick, I think we could add some additional space for that.
Yeah, my thought is that they could even have a private entrance to that private office, to the sidewalk, kind of the patio of the building, so really even give it more of a retail or business incubator space, having that private entrance directly into their space. And then, you know, also connected to the co-working.
So when you,
Sorry, Chris had his hand up.
sorry.
Two, comment and a question. The question is, are you talking about Lake Ridge Bank when you say the rotunda? Oh, okay. I know that pretty well. When you said rotunda, I didn't know somewhere over in the country.
Don't
but
you
that
have
was
something?
very,
Don't you have something to do with that bank?
a little bit. Yeah, it's a real nice space. For me, it would be a no vote to have it in the future and not something now. We need to have some more commercial presence now, that incubator or something, but there needs to be some additional commercial other than the rotunda. And you don't have that cool old architecture. You don't have anything that's there on Atwood Avenue. That, I mean, man, that is a super space. And everybody else thought we were nuts when we did it.
Right,
We knew we were in the Willie Street neighborhood. We knew it would work.
right.
But for me, I know you talked about the commercial, there's got to be more commercial. I mean, that we're talking about the GDP, that's a major change from the GDP.
Yeah. Okay. Corey? Oh,
That
sorry,
was-
Susan.
Well, yeah, my question was going to be, when you were talking about the ideas you were just talking about, you weren't necessarily talking about adding to the square footage of what you've got here now, were you? Which I think is what.
I think we could look at possibly adding to some
little
of the
bit.
square footage.
Okay, because it is significantly less than the previous one, which again, it's not as huge a thing for me, but.
Well, I'm still looking for whether we've got something that approximates a motion that could move this forward.
You know what, I'll make a motion, and if somebody wants to make an amendment to it or propose one, they feel free, right? But I have a question for Doug first. I don't think at least all the findings of fact here are appropriate, since we're not creating a new GDP. All we're doing is making a finding of fact. Basically, it would feel if it had some of these additional conditions, it would meet the intent and the clarity of the GDP that we approved. correct?
I would say some of the language there was a placeholder. Let's say there weren't additional comments, for example.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I would do is just strike the first two, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, and I'd take number 3 and say that we leave it the way it is. The Plan Commission determined that the plans substantially conform with the GDP approved 12/5/22, and blah, 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 with the conditions, if the conditions below are met. Because we're making a finding of facts, so to speak, that we say that this GDP complies with this additional information. Am I right? Am I getting this wrong? And then the city council would need to do the same thing, because both.
So these
Well,
stay?
no, they don't. I mean, they're good findings of fact when you're proving a GDP, but we're looking at whether the existing GDP we ever already approved, does this conform to it?
Right.
We've been very clear it doesn't, but we're saying tonight, with these additional conditions, we would say that it conforms to the GDP
Right,
that was approved.
right.
And we would, at least from us, I don't know about the council, but we would say that a PIP could move forward at this point.
Right.
Doug? Council?
Does that work for you?
Yes, it does.
Council? Is that clear?
I think so.
You're not our council, I get that.
Correct.
And I'm not
going to get
asking-
a call from
I'm-
Bill in the morning,
No,
and he's going to
no,
give me a talking
no.
to, John.
Yeah, he probably will. How'd you want to do it? But
I get along great
but-
with Bill.
But that's our intent tonight. We've not done this before. We're saying, it doesn't it doesn't meet the GDP, but with these changes, we feel it would meet the GDP, and we wouldn't require the applicant to go through the process again.
Right, and the changes that we're specifically calling out.
Well, I have to go to that part.
Right.
But I'm just saying, I think that's the way for us to do it. We're not approving a new
Right.
GDP.
Right,
That makes
agreed,
sense.
agreed.
We are determining that the plans substantially conform to GDP and may pursue precise implementation plan review if the following conditions are met.
Right.
Good? Okay.
Yeah.
Then the conditions would be, number 1 is written by staff, number 2 is written by staff, number 3, add-on without the loss of parking. Number 4 is enhanced articulation of the building. Number 5 is additional commercial space. Number 6 is additional masonry. And number 7, it's probably, well, let's leave it in there. A PIP has to come back to the commission for recommendation to the council.
Seven is what again?
We're going to talk about it, might be unnecessary normally, but since this is so unusual, I put it in there that a
Okay.
PIP must come back to us for a recommendation to the council.
Right, got it.
We need a second.
Yeah.
I'll
We need a second
to discuss.
Yeah, I'll second that, yeah. And then,
Yep, we have a second, so,
Okay.
no.
and then I would consider moving to strike the additional masonry. That's the only modification that I would
No
make.
additional masonry whatsoever. We don't even have a plan that shows us where there's masonry. We have him telling us where it is.
Gotcha.
He said it's along the whole front and the bottom. I don't know, or most of it. I can't tell it on
First
the.
floor on the front.
I can't tell on some of this. It's hidden by landscaping, and it's most of it, I don't know how high it is. You're okay with that?
Yes.
Okay.
So we have,
I have a,
he's suggesting an amendment. Is that a
Yep.
total amendment to
Yes.
the original motion?
Yep, that's an amendment.
So do I have a second?
I second.
You second the amendment on the motion, okay. So, any other discussion on the amendment? So we're voting on the amendment first. So, all those in favor of the amendment to strike the number 6, finding of fact, conditional approval, rather, condition of approval, signify by saying aye.
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 Nay?
Nay?
Okay. So that's struck. So now we're down to 6. Conditions of approval.
Yeah, and
Yes, Susan.
I guess I have a question about number 3. I'm not sure, I mean, because it says, change to meet the city standards of 30%, which I would like to see, but I'm not sure I think it's reasonable to say without the loss of any parking, because I'm just not sure where else they're going to be able to do that.
Can I respond to that?
Sure. I'm
I
asking
think
this
it's really
question.
important right now because we're saying this is the GDP. There's always fine adjustments in the PIP. But right now we have a GDP with so many units, so much commercial and so much parking. And to say, well, we'll just take out a couple parking stalls, I think honestly, I think there's all kinds of opportunity to get that green space in there without taking out parking
Without taking
stalls.
out
Yeah. But I put it in there because, and there might be different parking when it comes to us. There can be adjustments to parking in the PIP, but we don't have those proposed right now. So why I did that is because somebody said, well, we'll take out a couple parking stalls and meet that. And it's like, no, there's a lot of opportunities to do it, as well as, and we talked about it with the applicant, that if there's outstanding amenities and landscaping on a project, sometimes we'll say, hey, that makes up for having a little less green space because you have more here. But that's something we can't respond to until we see it.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have a motion on the floor. Chris?
Since we're going to, well, no, I'll do it in the PIP. I don't have to talk about it now.
So it seems to me that the items here, I mean, the enhanced articulation seems to me to be kind of a no-brainer. Like, it doesn't take, I mean, it doesn't, that's not, you know. Chris?
And the reason I said it that way is it might not be a walkthrough. It might be whatever you decide to do on the building, but you know the goal is to have some more movement, especially on Monona Drive, between what you do on the building or what you do in front of it. There's a lot of ways to do it, and we're not telling you how to do it, but it's a long facade.
Yeah. And we've talked about the flexibility around the commercial already in terms of things that you might do there. So we have a motion on the floor. Any other discussion on the motion on the floor? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay.
Really quick question. The amendment did pass, right?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, the amendment passed, right. So,
That got rid of 6.
yeah. Okay. So that takes us to now I'm confused as to how that takes us to C.
It takes us to the PIP discussion.
Yeah. Public hearing for Compass Properties on the consideration of a general development plan, GDP, and precise implementation plan, PIP, if necessary, for the site located at approximately 4601, 4711 Monona Drive between Springhaven and Dean Avenue for mixed-use development, case number 2-016-2021. So this is an opportunity for you to further delineate PIP considerations for us.
Yeah, I guess we didn't have anything else prepared
Okay.
to present or tonight.
Yeah. We could so that being the case, we'll just close C.
Unless there's somebody else.
Unless somebody else here wants to say something about item number C.
Online.
Is there anybody on Zoom?
I have a couple members of the public, it appears, online. I'm not sure if anybody else online would like to speak. Seeing no,
Not seeing
no
any
changes.
hands. Okay, so we're going to close C and we're going to go to D, which is pre-hearing conference. Compass Properties on request for consideration of a general development plan, GDP, and precise implementation plan, PIP, if necessary, for the site located approximately 4601-4711 Monona Drive between Springhaven and Dean Avenue for a mixed-use development, case number 2-016-2021.
Thanks. I won't really run through the details. I think specifically I saw this as an opportunity to, based upon how the unfinished business items A and B went, to provide a little more detail to the applicant. I think some of that has already been done, but I think specifics as it relates to the future PIP, some of the setbacks, specific locations on the site, possibly discussion, specific detailing on some of the masonry elements and some of those things that have just been mentioned. Possible parking and some of the flex uses there. I think some discussion around the BMO use, at least in terms of evening, off hours, and possible flexibility may assist with future discussion. The traffic, and if the existing impact analysis, the TIA, is of comfort to the commission, or if anything that has changed here, warrants that. And some guidance. I think again, there's been discussion of the landscaping. I know the berm in particular, sort of on the western edge along Gordon, is sort of a point that I think some guidance may well be appreciated in terms of verticality there versus plantings versus hardscape, things like that as well. So pretty open-ended, I would say, and really just an opportunity for greater detail on what's already been discussed. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Doug? Patrick, would you like to start us off? Since you missed out last
Yes,
time,
I was trying to-
I'm to give you an opportunity,
I got nothing
Okay.
at the moment. Yes.
Okay. Susan?
Yeah, I don't really feel like I have anything to add to what's already been said. We're
Yeah.
missing our landscape guy who would have suggestions,
Yeah.
who might be worth.
Well, we'll talk about native, we'll talk about native
plants.
plantings,
Well, native
yes,
plants, native plants. But in terms of, we talked about possibly earning some more green space points with more robust landscaping. I'm not sure what that really means, but talking with a landscape person, they would have suggestions perhaps. That's the only other thing. And then we already talked about the EV stuff, and so that's, you've heard a lot of it already. I don't have anything to add to what you're already hearing.
So to add, consider native plantings, obviously.
Yeah.
That'll be brought up.
The name of the project is Bloom, so
That's right.
we were planning that and wanted to incorporate that actually into the mural somehow, maybe some native plantings.
I thought it was Bloom because it was originally in Blooming Grove.
There's Blooming Grove as well. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You might as well capitalize on it. Yeah.
Yep. So that's the background, but we wanted to bring the flower.
Yeah, well, on that then, yes, please do. Because what you showed here, I know this is just but it's just like, here's some evergreens. There's a whole bunch of them. And that is me. So, and there's a bunch of of the daylilies that everyone has everywhere. So, I think.
Are you getting that, Matt?
And because you talked about the idea of that setback now is, you said it was like park-like, and you had I see the benches here, but I mean, if it's like a bench next to a shrub, I don't know. I just think it is an opportunity to make this a much more appealing space. And the bikes we talked about, so just make sure there's places for people to park their bikes. I know the residents will have space, but if you're going to have a cafe and you're going to have BMO, or if they want to park their bike and walk across the street, whatever, they might do a couple of different things. So make sure there's bike parking, and we'll want to see what the green space, that garden area, that is, is it a lawn? Is it a garden? Is it what is it going to be? So.
I think the intent was for the tenants to be able to garden. And it's another reason I don't want a breezeway. having the high school kids go back there and stomping on the flowers and smoking pot, whatever they do.
They do that at the beach.
We don't do that here in Manila, do we? Sorry. Good music.
But those are the things, I guess, I'm seeing just from, there's.
I agree with you 100%. These are very limited renderings, and like I said, we have $750,000 at soft costs, and we're trying to save time and money.
Yeah.
But I agree with you 100%. I would love to see nothing better than a beautiful landscape along Gordon Avenue. And from what I understood from the previous meetings and the residents of Gordon Avenue, we put a lot of time and effort into creating that green space, and we really want that to be public use and have park benches or sidewalk, and have it be an amenity for all those folks who live on Gordon. So, yeah.
Can I ask you a quick question on a comment you made earlier that goes to the condition about increasing the open and green space? You mentioned green roof features sometimes being able to count towards that.
We have done that.
Can you tell us a couple examples? I'm sure I've seen them. Just so we have a concept in our minds as we're trying to address that.
I think the current, didn't we do it? The current.
We might have actually on the pool deck, we may have allowed some of the green on the pool deck to count towards the green. Is that right? I remember that correctly?
Yeah, and I think that one in particular, just with the park across the street too, I
Right.
remember the density, the percentages were a little lower on that because it was part of the phased development with a 1 acre, if not more, across the street park. So I think there was some credit given to the pool deck, but I think most recent green roof was actually this one with the GDP, was the previous one with
this
the
one?
GDP.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
okay.
I think the 9,500 square feet of sort of green space that was seen as an additional, I don't think it was necessarily, from a metrics perspective, a 1-to-1 ratio of green roof versus green space at grade. But I think it added to sort of the overall package that was provided. And I, from a staff perspective, I noticed on the canopy and on the entryway there was landscaping, and there'd be elements on that roof there. So I think it's each case, viewed individually, I would suggest, but from projects, I believe they're the two that come to mind.
And we have talked about, I'm not good at remembering the specifics, but there are some where, depending on the landscaping that's done.
I would say it's more the landscape features that are done. It's having that really tricked out decorative patio that's really above and beyond what people would do. Then we say, hey, that helps towards, it might not be green space, but it really enhances this entire area. And we've used that. We've used that much more often than the other one. The other one is controversial, whether or not we use rooftops, because the green space requirement is for ground level for everything. And so if there's a green roof up 4 stories, what does that do to help the parking area? So it's a big controversial. It's environmental. It can allow you water quality benefits. It can do a lot of those things, but does it help your green space down below? So it might even depend where it is. The Bloom was the first time I'm aware of that got much at all consideration for that.
Well, I guess I would argue as well, though, that it does help with the heat index as well. So
Well,
it's a consideration.
it may.
It could.
It may. I think there's a lot of studies that are going on with that yet. Its main benefit is environmental for water.
Yeah.
So there might be some mixed opinions on the commission.
Yeah, no, that's good. I like to make sure we understand the ideas that are out there,
Yeah.
because we've got some vague conditions that we're going to try to come back and comply with, so more ideas are better.
Going back to that, what about the covered parking? We have solar panels there now. If that was green and we moved solar panels on top of the actual apartment building, would that be something more attractive?
Like an
because
arbor?
On the covered parking, putting, plantings and a green roof on there, people would be able to see it then, like you said, on the fourth floor, no one would see it.
Do you know what type of planting? I mean, there's all different types of green roofs.
Right.
And basically, a basic green roof has sedum. It's not a planting you see from down below, it's just sedum. And to get to the other ones with the grass and stuff, you need an extensive, there's intensive and extensive. I think extensive is the deeper one, where you have a lot more soil and you do a lot more. It's a lot more expensive to build. And look into your maintenance costs too, on what they are, because there's a lot of standards. The Dane County, I'm sorry to do this, but I was on a committee that researched it, because there's no standards in Madison or Dane County. They put out brand new guidance. Madison's already adopted it, but Dane County has it as guidance, and we use most of their guidance. So there's a lot to consider with what you do there and how it will work. And if you're thinking it's just going to be a sedum roof, there's water quality benefits for sure.
But not open space.
Well,
Green space.
and trust me, the chair is quite thrilled that you have some solar panels.
Yeah, I am. But I would also say, I mean, it's like any other. I'm just thinking of my own yard, since I was just away for 3 weeks, and landscaping is only as good, or green roofs are only as good as the maintenance you put into them. And so, from my standpoint, if you had a solar roof as opposed to a green roof, I'd be even happier with that. I think you're going to get a better benefit out of it. And especially with incentives going in the other direction, hopefully that won't change before you stick a shovel in the ground. I think, I'd be happy with that. Did you have anything else, Corey?
Yeah.
Okay.
Chris, did you have anything?
Doug, you asked about the TIA study. I think that's really more of the GDP, and we already looked at that, and we felt that the traffic is not an issue with that study. In fact, closing all those curb cuts is a big advantage to the neighborhood. You mentioned setbacks, but again, I think that's part of the GDP, is the setbacks you have on your property. They're good. I mean, you stayed within the ones we asked for before. I think all that looks good. So the PIP is really all the details. The one thing I'll mention is landscaping. Everybody else has, but you have 100 and almost 70 stalls, and you need, obviously we have standards for that, but the one thing I'll say, this is a very dominant corner in Monona. As you can tell, we're very sensitive about it. And typically, we don't say hitting the minimum of standards is okay on a corner like this with such a building. We look to exceed standards. The minimum might apply to a mid-block where there's not a lot of area or opportunity. So when you're looking at your landscape, don't just say, oh, there, we met the bare minimum, let's submit it. Fair enough? Other than that, we've talked about most of the details that we can with what plans we have in hand, but I think you've got a good handle of it all.
If I could.
Yeah.
Just one other thing to flag for the applicant. It's in the staff report, but just the commission typically with these projects with underground parking does count all of the stalls in terms of tree islands and those elements. So just as a clarification point there, that looking at canopy trees and all of those types of things, I think that gets to the point of the quality of landscaping too. But that's been the case in previous projects, and so just in terms of future planning, I would just caution it with that as well, just keeping that in mind.
If I can, I have one more comment, and I'll be at odds with Rob, who's not here, but for me, I like big islands more than a bunch of small ones. So you've got 12, 12, and 4. If it were me, I'd do 14, 14, and take that teeny little island you got there that the tree's never going to grow in, and add it to the other islands so you have a nice big island that something will actually thrive in, and you can do some landscaping around. Rob might comment about it, and he may, but one big island, you can have a lot more selection, what you can put in there, a tree that'll survive. Those tiny little islands don't do a lot of good.
Would you be okay with 14 stalls in a row?
I would be for enhanced island, for a nicer, bigger island, instead of having that little bitty one you show between the 12 and the 4. That you're not going to grow anything in that island. well, I shouldn't say anything, you'll grow sedum and grass, but I don't think trees will prosper there. So, that's me. I don't know, rest of the commission, you agree with that? Nicer island versus, you know.
Yeah, that makes sense. Makes
Yeah.
sense to me, yeah.
We don't always make sense.
I've got a lot of small islands and dead trees that
Yes.
I replace.
Yeah.
So I agree with you 100%.
With a
Chris.
small island, very specific trees that will actually grow in there and grow under blacktop.
Well, I was just out on the east side, just playing, out on the American Parkway. I've got some properties out there, and it's just, you're absolutely right.
Yeah. I would just say one other thing, which is that I'm going to go back to the monochromatic and the backside, which is that, I mean, as I look at, I don't know what, these aren't numbered, but you've got from the north side, at least 50% of the north side because the front edge is brick, but from the north side all the way around the back, except for changing from a light gray to a dark gray, and then all the way around again on the south side until you get to the MO, it's like all siding, gray siding. And to me, that just feels like screaming, this is the backside of a building. And that would be okay if you were on an alley, but that's where the residential area starts. So I'm not suggesting that by changing up the colors or considering changing up the materials, that you go to some, tricolored bright thing that you might find up the street. I'm just saying, I think if it was less monochromatic and if there was a way to mix up the materials a little bit more to make the backside a little bit more interesting than just kind of looking like to me it just looks like it's just, again, a huge amount of surface that's all the same color, black windows, and all the same siding. Yeah.
I 100% agree, but now that you have TKWA on board and you're going to keep going, then I'm sure they'll do something fun with it. But I agree with not wanting to see a box of crayons that threw up or anything either.
Right.
Lego boxes.
Right.
You're
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's tasteful.
Maybe do on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the other thing, just, and I think this was already mentioned, but I too am somebody who very pleased to see the balconies. I remember bringing up the balconies the very first time we met with
Yes.
the developer, and certainly in the 3-bedroom units. It's hard for me to tell from the drawings because I understand these are preliminary and you've already put a ton of money into this, but like on one of the drawings, there's no balconies on the backside, or a whole bunch of the units on the backside, and then another one of the drawings that shows balconies on the backside. And I would say, I like the balconies, number one. Number two, and certainly the 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom units, I would think you'd want bigger balconies. I mean, if I'm gonna pay premium price for a 3-bedroom unit or a 2-bedroom unit, and all I can put is a single chair and a coffee table or a table big enough to, put a beer down, that's probably not going to do it for me. It's too small. So if you could, to the extent that's possible, which I think would be pretty easy. And I have to say that I kind of like the fencing. I know we don't.
I do too.
And so.
We just have to figure out a way around it.
Figure out how to way around it, because I agree that I think it adds something in this particular case. So, but otherwise, enough has been said, and I appreciate you guys working through it with us.
Can I ask one more question? Does
You bet.
balcony make financial sense? I mean, I got to think apartments rent a lot better with an outdoor balcony. But
I
if you
agree
find
with
something-
Nancy. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Just curious.
And
to see what might know.
I couldn't believe there weren't balconies. I mean,
Yeah.
just everything, when you got into actually the engineering and materials, it was unbuildable. I mean, we would have lost $5 million
Right.
doing that project.
Right. Yeah.
We were told people don't like balconies anymore. Remember that?
Yeah.
Yes.
I like them.
Most people I know like them.
Yeah, most buildings seem to have them these days, so. I don't know.
I don't know, my son doesn't like outside. He just
Yeah.
sits on the computer all day, so he probably wouldn't care.
Does
He's
he
not
have any-
renting
does he have
apartments.
any plants that might want to get a little rain on them or something in between? I don't know. They got a spot for him too.
Okay, anything else of value?
Sorry.
This CRP discussion. With that, we will close the pre-hearing. Thank you guys for coming tonight. We hope-
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Pleasure meeting you.
Meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
Nice meeting you.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let's move forward. I'm going to go to number 8, reports of staff and commission members.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Economic development update, the CDA will be meeting tomorrow, and a shorter meeting tomorrow. They'll be discussing possible TID 10, which would actually be the location of the possible Bloom project. Just from a scheduling perspective and timing, they needed to sort of proceed with that. So city's TIF consultant has been assisting with that and discussing eligible project costs and all those types of things that would go into the project plan. So they'll be discussing that. And the both development agreements are being drafted right now for the Whitehorse project, both for the drive and for the North Point project as well. So concurrently working on that with the city attorney, but also the engineering and all those elements that are going into that. The team is working well together, the multiple engineers, different folks for different projects, working well together. So the Strand sent most recent comments back just late last week, so they're working on those now and still looking to get moving.
Can I take it that means that project's going ahead?
That's
If
my
they're drafting
understanding.
final developers agreements?
Yes, we have an agreement on term sheets, and so Dev will be in detail on that, but the parameters are agreement.
I think I said it in front of you before, but when we have these things, if there gets to be loggerheads between engineers and stuff, they can always come back to the commission for interpretation. If say, our consultant and their consultant can't agree.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah, this was unique, just having multiple different projects and such, but they've worked well, and I think we've come to a good outcome there. Potential plan commission items. I actually have an application that just came in. It may push to the next meeting, just depending on availability of the applicant, but I'm not sure if I've mentioned this before. Pelletieri have acquired the former Go Right Way space, 2801.
Go right way.
The former bus use over at 2801 Industrial. So they would be looking to, at this point, it would be a sort of reuse of the building, probably more of a maintenance type facility indoor for vehicles with safe, secure parking, employee parking in the front. Limited build out at this point with view to a large scale plan at a later date. So they have zoning permit application for that, but also some fencing and some of those elements that will be coming in. And they're certainly using feedback that came in with the Go Right Way, especially with their more advanced plans in terms of fencing, location, design, and all of those types of features. And certainly I'll be working with the applicant here, just in terms of timing as to next meetings and planning those out moving forward. That's it for me.
So it really was a case that Go Right Way just up and left after they didn't get the Madison contract.
Yes, they were unsuccessful. I don't know if they pursued it or it just didn't materialize. And I think Pelletieri, as they say in their letter, they've continually, space constraints and happy to stay in Monona, so that opportunity came up and they jumped at it.
So Go Right Way never owned the building. They just had a lease and a commitment if they got the contract, I suspect, and they bought it from the owner that still owned it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think there's anything on on diversity, equity, inclusion?
Nothing from staff.
Or anything on sustainability?
No.
Okay. And the July 10th and July 24th agendas are looking healthy?
Yes, I'm expecting those. The Pelletary did meet the deadline, but they are looking to move quickly, but it will just depend on availability. So I'll let everybody know July 10th, but I know we've got some signage and things as well that if we've got a couple items, we'll put them together. So I'll be in touch, but certainly plan on both of those for now.
Okay. Any plan commission requests for information from staff? Yes.
I am curious if the housing report did get shared with council and other committees. We had talked about that.
Yes, I certainly have it on my radar for council. I wanted both alders to be present for council as well. I thought that would sort of be beneficial for discussions. So working with schedules and timing of that, but certainly I'd be targeting one of the July meetings for city council to bring that forward. And at that point, the alders would know and make the offer that I would attend a meeting or two of other committees, commissions as necessary. But I think council would be the logical next step.
I mean, I mentioned it today, when we were discussing this with the applicant, but it would be good to have a continued conversation in the city about how to try to encourage other types of housing. We can't do it here.
Yeah.
So how can we do it?
Yep.
Because I went back and was looking at the report, and I'm like, well, the numbers are just, like, I had calculated out some percentages when we had met with Thor and talked about it, and it's just, it's not, we're not getting any other kinds. So, and there's nothing coming to us where there's other kinds of development either. So I think it'd be good to share with them and hear what they all have to say about it.
Yeah, it's definitely we've definitely been in conversation, as you know. I think as you know, Patrick and the mayor have been going to all the Dane County, working on something very specific.
It's taking too long, but we're working on something.
I work for state government, so I understand the snail pace.
Part of it's staff time too.
Yeah.
Do we want to create another committee to address that, and then who gets to staff it?
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
Right, and actually, it wasn't in Cottage Grove. It took 3 years for their task force to come up with a general.
We've got a lot of ideas, a lot of things.
Yeah.
But it's in process.
But I think I know I can safely say that it's on the radar of all of the alders. So when we're all there and we can have a robust discussion, it'll be really helpful. And
I would say, just anecdotally as well, these are not to the point of a planning commission application, but I am getting having conversations with developers of I'd say more varied products, kind of preliminary and early stage conversations. And couple times now the discussion of condos or that product has at least been discussed. So I would say the study and that documentation is helpful. Developers are becoming familiar with that as well. But also I would say there is just sort of a recognition, and those products are coming up more in discussion as well. So.
Okay, thanks.
I have one request, which I know that you and I talked about, but I'm sure other commission members would be curious as well, and that is there any movement on the Monona Garden site?
Mm-hmm. So I have been checking in with the applicant. There's been some back and forth in terms of some discussion of condos and some of those elements, but certainly coordinating with I know they're pretty close on the engineering work of that. There were some conditions of approval there to be done. Coordinating with Public Works, with street resurfacing and some of the kind of CIP projects they have there. But generally, it is moving forward. Last I had heard, they were still working on TIF financing for part of that deal, but continue to monitor that and certainly, it's in the right direction, is what I'm hearing.
They wouldn't be spending money on engineering and all this if they weren't moving forward. There's no way.
Right, it just seems like it's been a while, and we haven't heard much, and, I always like to see us shovel the
Maybe
ground.
they're waiting for those interest rates to start that climb back down.
And as long as we're waiting, last but not least, have you heard anything more from Cindy?
Nothing from Slindy, no. Staff does continue to sort of reach out periodically, check in, and there have been a few different concepts discussed, and certainly since they came in for their GDP plan and approvals, I think there's been some discussion and some evolution of commercial and some of those elements, and so I think I've been keeping them apprised in Housing Study again, another product that they've seen. Just keeping them informed of the other projects, and they're continuing to watch, what's moving forward as well. So I think at this point, it still doesn't make sense for them, but they're aware, and it's an open dialogue certainly with staff.
Is that construction on that second building on the Chipotle property, is that going ahead, or is that stalled?
So at this point, we still have some concerns with the first phase, most notably landscaping and some things to button up there. So we're holding that just because of the way the staging would take place and things. But we're hoping some sod will be down this week for that. The irrigation system is now in, and so they do have requests in. Their sort of staff are currently holding it just to get phase one completed. We have some things that are timeline related, such as the lighting and things like that, to convert back to gooseneck and such. But some of the things like the open, there's still erosion control features and measures in place. So just getting those things buttoned up before we fence off and begin phase two. But they're looking to do that. They have plan review and all those things, so moving in the right direction. And I should add just the pediatric dental. You may have noticed I drove by today. The fence is up. They have their raise permit to begin demolition, and so that is going to be moving forward here the next couple of days. So, yeah.
I would just add, as it relates to the Sunday property, that since I learned at a plan commission meeting that everybody else drives to the post office by going through the bowling alley, I guess I'm the only one that uses that lot is getting really bad.
They patched a bunch of potholes.
They did fill the potholes in the closest driveway.
And the closest one, but not in the bowling alley. And
if you take the far one around, you can kind of dodge them.
Right. Yeah, well, I just know that a couple of people actually, a couple of constituents had actually reached out to me and said, don't they have any responsibility? Because some of those holes there are big. They're really big. And they definitely would not be healthy for a vehicle.
I'd be careful about that, because they could then just shut down their driveways and say the property's closed.
It is a private property.
I think there are some joint access easements, but.
Okay, I was thinking there was joint access.
I'm happy to patch the potholes that we all use to get in and out of the post office.
Okay. All right.
Well, you can get there now without going through a pothole.
Yeah, I know, it's nice.
Unless we have anything else, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I will move because Rob is not here.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.